Surprise announcement, the scent of fresh-baked cinnamon rolls drifted through the kitchen, wrapping the Parker home in a warm, the deceptive comfort. Liam Parker sat at the head of the small oak dining table, tapping the rim of his coffee mug with a teaspoon, pretending to read the morning paper. He wasn't much of a morning person, but Sunday breakfast at his parents' place had always been a kind of unspoken ritual, part tradition, part obligation. His mother, Margaret, floated in from the kitchen with that same brisk efficiency she'd perfected over the years. Her pearl earrings swayed gently as she set a tray down, not bothering to look at him. "Eat while it's hot." "Liam," she said, her tone neither warm nor cold, just procedural. Charles Parker, his father, emerged moments later, adjusting the cuffs of his shirt like he was preparing for a meeting rather than a family breakfast. He had that same deep baritone voice that could turn either comforting or commanding, depending on his mood. Today it sounded strangely buoyant. "We have news," Charles said, glancing at Margaret with a smile that made the corners of his mouth crease. Liam folded the paper and leaned back. "Good news, I hope." Margaret's eyes softened in a way that made Liam brace for impact. She reached for Charles's hand in a strangely synchronized motion. They both sat down. "We're renewing our vows," she announced out the words. Hung in the air for a moment, carried by the faint hum of the refrigerator. Liam blinked. "Renewing your vows," he repeated slowly. "Like another wedding?" Margaret gave a little laugh, patting his arm. "Not exactly a wedding, more like a celebration. 35 years together deserves something beautiful." Charles leaned forward, his voice dropping to a tone that suggested this was a decision already in motion. "We've been dreaming about a ceremony on the beach. White chairs, string lights, champagne at sunset. But you know how it is, things like that cost money. A lot of it." Margaret sighed dramatically, as though the weight of romance was a financial burden too great to bear. "We were thinking maybe a small dinner instead, but it's just not the same." Liam felt something stir inside him. A beachside vow renewal? It sounded extravagant, that there was an almost childlike hope in their voices. He knew what it was like to crave something beautiful and be told it was out of reach. And for once, maybe he could be the one to make it happen. "I'll cover it," Liam said before the thought could be censored. "The whole thing. Venue, catering, flowers, whatever you want. My gift to you." Both parents froze. Margaret tilted her head slightly, as if she wasn't sure she'd heard him right. "That's generous," she said finally. "Charles's." Brow furrowed, and for a moment Liam thought he might actually refuse. Then the corner of his mouth lifted. "Maybe you're good for something after all," Charles said with a half smirk, the kind of backhanded comment Liam had grown up swallowing. Liam ignored the sting. "Seriously, let's make it happen." Margaret's lips curved into a smile, the kind reserved for public moments, not private ones. "All right then, a beach ceremony it is." As they moved on to breakfast, Liam sipped his coffee and let himself imagine the scene, his parents laughing under the golden light, the waves behind them, the moment captured forever in photographs. Maybe, just maybe, this would be the thing that finally proved he wasn't the failure they seemed to think. He was, but somewhere deep down, in the quiet place Liam rarely visited, there was a whisper he chose to ignore. "Be careful what you give. They may not let you keep it." Building the dream. The following week became a blur of phone calls, emails, and contracts. Liam discovered that planning an event, especially a beachfront vow renewal, was like juggling knives. Beautiful, but dangerous if you lost focus. The first thing he booked was the venue, the Azure Shore Pavilion. A pristine stretch of sand tucked behind a row of weathered dunes where the ocean kissed the land in rolling silver waves. The ceremony platform was a simple wooden deck painted ivory, framed by arching driftwood. It wasn't cheap, but as he walked along the beach with the event manager, Liam felt a surge of pride. This was the kind of moment his parents deserved, and maybe if he was honest, it was also the kind of moment he deserved to give them. He signed the contract in his name, his bank account listed as the payment source. It wasn't unusual. The vendors didn't care whose card was on file as long as the money cleared. He didn't think twice about it. By midweek, Liam was knee-deep in catering options. Margaret had been too busy to attend the tastings, and Charles claimed work was keeping him late. So Liam sat alone at a long table draped in linen, sampling oysters, miniature crab cakes, and champagne flutes filled to the rim. The caterers. Assistant, a bubbly woman named Carla, made conversation. "So, this is for your wedding?" she asked. Liam laughed. "No, my parents' vow renewal." "That's sweet," Carla said, then tilted her head. "You must be really close to them." Liam hesitated. "Close enough," he said, and took another sip of champagne. When Margaret did involve herself, it was mostly to veto his choices. "I don't like peonies, they're too showy," she said on the phone one afternoon after he'd already paid the florist's deposit. "And white chairs?" "No, gold ones are classier. But make sure they're not too shiny. We don't want it to look tacky." Vanessa, his sister, would occasionally chime in during group calls. "You're going to need better wine." "Dad hates cheap stuff," she'd remark, as if Liam had been planning to serve box Chardonnay. She always made it sound like she was helping, but her tone was dipped in quiet judgment. Still, Liam pushed forward. Every time he transferred money or signed a new receipt, he imagined the look on his parents' faces when they saw it all come together. He told himself it would be worth it. Late one night, while finalizing the seating chart, Liam noticed something odd. His own name was nowhere near the front. In fact, he was seated in the second section, sandwiched between distant cousins he barely knew. He almost called Margaret to ask why, but stopped himself. It was just a detail, right? Nothing worth fighting over. Still, a small unease lingered. The final straw for the week came in the form of a comment he wasn't meant to hear. He'd stopped by his parents' house to drop off a sample bouquet from the florist. As he stepped into the hallway, he heard voices in the kitchen. "He probably can't afford this," Margaret was saying in a low tone. "You know how he is with money." Charles's reply was muffled, but Liam caught enough. "Let him feel important. It's not like he's got much else going on." The words slid under his skin, cold and sharp. He stood there for a moment, bouquet in hand, before quietly setting it on the counter and leaving without saying goodbye. That night, in a small apartment, Liam stared at the receipts spread across his table. He told himself that their words didn't matter, that he was doing this for the right reasons, but deep inside, something fragile had already begun to crack. Old wounds resurface. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound in Liam's apartment as he sat at the small kitchen table, staring at the half-empty bottle of wine in front of him. Outside, the city lights blinked like restless eyes. He poured another glass, not because he wanted it, but because he needed something to quiet the gnawing ache that had settled in his chest since overhearing his parents. He leaned back, closing his eyes, and without meaning to, the years began to unspool. In his mind, like an old film reel, he was 8 years old again, sitting cross-legged on the living room carpet, showing his mother a picture he had drawn in crayon, a crooked little house with a red roof and flowers in the yard. "That's nice, honey," Margaret had said without looking up from folding laundry. "But Vanessa just got the lead role in her school play. Isn't that wonderful?" It was always like that. His sister Vanessa, the golden child, was the benchmark against which Liam's worth was silently measured. She was the one who brought home trophies, straight A's, and the kind of confidence that made teachers adore her. Liam's efforts were Fine. Acceptable. Nothing remarkable. By the time he was a teenager, Liam had stopped showing them things he was proud of. When he got his first job at a local bookstore, he told his parents over dinner. Charles's response had been a snort. Part-time? That's barely work, Liam. You need to think bigger. Even when Liam managed to land a full-time position as an assistant at a design firm years later, the praise was muted. Vanessa, meanwhile, was climbing the corporate ladder at a marketing company, and every achievement she had was celebrated. Like a national holiday, one memory in particular still burned. He was 21, broke, and between jobs. His car had broken down, and he'd asked his parents for a small loan to cover repairs. Charles had handed him the money with a sigh. You've got to stop mooching, Liam. You're an adult now. The word mooch had felt like a slap. He promised himself never to ask them for anything again, and for the most part, he hadn't. Now, here he was, nearly a decade later, pouring thousands into their vow renewal without a second thought. And still, nothing had changed. They still saw him through the same narrow lens. A son who was somehow less than Dot. The wine warmed his throat, but it didn't dull the sting. He looked over at the stack of receipts and contracts on his table. Each one bore his signature, proof of what he was doing for them, proof he could provide, proof he wasn't a mooch. But deep down, a thought crept in, uninvited and unsettling. Even this won't be enough for them. He didn't know it yet, but the vow renewal would become more than just a gift. It would be the final test and the breaking point. The dinner. That changed everything. The restaurant smelled faintly of rosemary and charred garlic, the kind of warm, expensive scent that made even a simple meal feel like a celebration. Liam had chosen La Meridiana, a softly lit Italian place with velvet booths and crystal water glasses. His treat for the final planning dinner before the vow renewal. He wanted the night to be smooth, light, and maybe even joyful. Margaret arrived. First, in a pale blue dress that matched her earrings. Vanessa followed, her phone already in her hand, thumbs flying as she typed. Charles came last, his cologne trailing a faint trail of oak and leather. Nice place, Charles said, sliding into the booth. Hope you're not overextending yourself. Liam smiled tightly. It's fine, Dad. I wanted us to have a night to go over the final details. Menus opened, wine was poured, and for a while, conversation flowed. They discussed chair placements, music choices, and the photographer's arrival time. Liam felt a flicker of satisfaction. This was the version of family he wished they could be all the time. When the main courses arrived, steaming plates of osso buco and linguine vongole, Liam leaned back, swirling his wine. You know, he said lightly, I've been living and breathing this event for weeks. I think I know more about chair sashes than any man should. Margaret chuckled. Vanessa smirked, but Charles gave a dry laugh that didn't match his eyes. Let's not act like you're doing us a huge favor here, he said, spearing a piece of veal. We appreciate it, but you've always been a bit of a mooch. The word landed like a dropped glass, shattering the moment. Liam froze, his fork halfway to his mouth. Excuse me? Charles shrugged, as if he'd said nothing more than, pass the salt. You know, borrowing money here, getting help there, never really standing fully on your own. Margaret's voice slipped in, sharp but calm. Your father doesn't mean it that way, it's just, there have been times, Liam, where you've leaned on us more than we'd like. Vanessa didn't look up from her pasta, but her smirk had deepened. Liam set his fork down slowly, his pulse ticking in his ears. I've been paying for this entire thing. Every cent. I haven't asked for a dime from you. Charles waved a hand, dismissive. It's not about this. It's about a pattern. Margaret sipped her wine. We're just saying, let's keep things in perspective. The rest of the dinner was a blur of forced conversation and clinking cutlery. Liam barely tasted his food. That word mooch looped in his mind. An echo from years ago, now made fresh and raw. When the check came, he paid without hesitation, sliding his card to the waiter as if daring them to notice. On the drive home, the city lights blurred past his windshield. He realized with a sick twist in his gut that no matter what he gave them, they'd always see him the same way, but he didn't yet know how deep that belief ran or how far they'd go to prove it. The bandit happened 2 days later, on a Wednesday afternoon, when the sky was the color of wet concrete and the air felt heavy with rain. Liam was at his desk, half listening to a conference call, when his phone buzzed. It was a text from Vanessa. Almost didn't open it. Her messages usually meant drama, but something about the clipped preview on the screen made his chest tighten. Vanessa, Mom and Dad have decided it's best if you don't attend. Less drama. Liam stared at the words, reading them over and over as if they might rearrange themselves into something less absurd. He typed a reply. Liam, what are you talking about? The response came quickly. Vanessa, things have been tense. They think it's better for everyone if you're not there. Don't make this harder. He sat back in his chair, a bitter laugh catching in his throat. Not only had he been funding their perfect beachside dream, but now they were locking the door on him entirely and handing the key to the sister who had done nothing but criticize. The phone call from his mother came that evening. Her tone was syrupy at first, like she was trying to ease him into the punchline. Liam, honey, you've been so generous, but we've been sensing tension. Your father thinks it might be best if you sit this one out just to keep the day smooth. Sit this one out? His voice rose despite himself. I paid for it. It's not about money, dear. It's about peace. We don't want any uncomfortable energy around our guests. The words hit him harder than he expected. Uncomfortable energy. Like he was an unpredictable storm cloud hanging over their golden sunset. After the call, he pulled out the guest list Margaret had emailed him weeks ago. He scanned the names, and sure enough, his had been erased completely. As if he'd never been invited in the first place, he set the paper down, staring at it for a long time. Something inside him shifted, not with the hot flare of anger, but with the cool, deliberate click of resolve. If they didn't want him there, fine. But they were about to learn that generosity had limits. Quiet departure the day before the ceremony. Liam drove to the Azure Shore Pavilion under the pretense of checking on something for the planner. In truth, he just needed to see it once. More, the thing he had built piece by piece. Before walking away for good, the sky was painted with late afternoon gold, the waves rolling in with a rhythm that felt almost mocking. Workers bustled about, setting up rows of gleaming gold chairs. In perfect symmetry, the floral arch, white roses, and eucalyptus, just as Margaret had requested, was already in place, the petals trembling in the ocean breeze. It was beautiful. It was everything they'd asked for, and he wasn't welcome. He strolled along, the edge of the setup, hands in his pockets, trying to imagine what the scene would look like the next evening. His parents laughing, champagne glasses raised, the photographer capturing every perfect moment, moments he'd bought and yet been cut from entirely. One of the staff approached him, clipboard in hand. Are you Liam Parker? The one who booked the venue? That's me, he said. Just wanted to confirm, you're still the point of contact for all vendors tomorrow, correct? Liam hesitated, the words echoing in his head. You're still the point of contact? Yes, he said finally. I am. The staff member smiled, oblivious to the way something inside Liam had just clicked into place. Perfect. We'll be in touch if we need anything. He wandered down to the shoreline, letting the water lap at his shoes. The wind carried the scent of salt and fresh blooms from the arch above. He thought about the months of planning, the sleepless nights making sure invoices were paid, The way his parents had smiled when he'd said, "It's my gift to you." A gift they'd decided he wasn't even worthy of witnessing Dot by the time he got back to his car. The decision was fully formed, solid and sharp in his mind. He wasn't going to fight them. He wasn't going to yell or demand an invitation back. He was going to leave quietly and take something with him. Something they wouldn't see coming until it was far too late. The hidden claws back home, Liam sat at his kitchen table with a steaming mug of coffee and the contract folder he'd nearly forgotten about. The papers had been sitting there for weeks, gathering a thin layer of dust, invoices, vendor agreements, venue rental forms. If he was going to walk away, he wanted to know exactly what he was walking away with. He started with a venue contract. His eyes skimmed the fine print until a paragraph caught his attention. The undersigned booking party retains full control over event access, schedule adjustments, and final vendor approval. No changes to primary contact or authorization may be made without written consent from the booking party. Liam read it twice, then a third time. The booking party, the one with all the power, was him, not Margaret, not Charles, him. That meant every vendor, every chair, every bouquet of flowers, they all answered to Liam Parker until the final payment cleared. And that payment, still pending for 2 key suppliers. His pulse quickened. This wasn't just about pulling the plug. It was about rewriting the script entirely. He opened his laptop and started making a list. Venue access policy, catering delivery, time florist delivery confirmation, audio equipment drop off. Each one had a box next to it. Each box was another opportunity to decide whether his parents' perfect evening would stay perfect. He picked up his phone and called the venue manager, a brisk woman named Elise. "Elise, it's Liam Parker. Just wanted to confirm I'm still the primary contact for tomorrow's event." "Yes, sir. All requests will go through you." "Good to know," Liam said, his voice calm, almost cheerful. "There may be a few changes." As he hung up, he leaned back in his chair, the contract still spread out before him. They'd taken him out of the picture. But the truth was, he'd been holding the frame the whole time. And now, he was going to decide what the picture would look like. The first cup of rain had cleared by morning, leaving the air warm and heavy. Liam was already awake, coffee in hand, his phone lighting up with vendor reminders. The ceremony was less than 8 hours away. He started with a florist. "Morning." "Liam," the voice chirped on the other end. "We're set to deliver the arrangements at 4 as scheduled." Liam glanced at the note in front of him. "Delivery, 4 p.m. Ceremony, 6 p.m. Plenty of time for setup." If they were actually delivering, "Actually," he said, keeping his tone friendly, "we'll need to push delivery back to tomorrow morning. Family decided to do photos with the flowers fresh." A pause. "Tomorrow? That's not what the contract says." "I'll take care of the paperwork on my end. Just hold off until then." The florist hesitated, but Liam's name was the one on the invoice and the one holding the deposit. "If you're sure." "I'm sure," Liam said, ending the call. Next was the catering company. The menu had been finalized weeks ago. A lavish spread of lobster tails, steak, and imported cheeses. "Hi, this is Liam Parker for the Parker vow renewal," he said smoothly. "We've had a last-minute dietary change. Could you swap the lobster for grilled chicken across the board?" "Grilled chicken?" The caterer repeated, baffled. "Yes, budget concerns. And please hold dessert delivery until after the event." "But thank you. You've been great." He hung up before they could argue further. By noon, 2 key changes were locked in. No flowers until after the guests had gone, and the luxurious seafood menu reduced to something resembling a backyard barbecue. It was enough to make things look off without completely derailing the event. Yet Liam closed his laptop, leaned back, and let the satisfaction settle in. The beauty of it was no one would suspect him because no one believed he was even involved anymore. But this was only the first cut. The deeper ones were still coming. Pulling the thread by mid-afternoon, the venue was buzzing. Staff in black uniforms hustled between the reception hall and the oceanfront arch, setting out plates and adjusting the gold chairs. Liam wasn't supposed to be anywhere near the place, but he still had the magic key. His phone. The audio company called. First, Mr. Parker, we're here with the sound equipment. Where should we set up? Actually, Liam said, tapping his pen against the counter, we're scaling down. No live music tonight, just speeches. Cancel the speaker system, but keep the handheld mic for the efficient. A beat of silence. Are you sure? We were told, yes, I'm the booking party. You'll still be paid for the day rate? They agreed reluctantly, loading the equipment back into the truck. Without the big speakers, the ocean's steady roar would swallow half the vows, and the DJ's playlist would sound like it was coming from a tin can. Next was the photographer. Hi, it's Liam Parker. Can you push the pre-ceremony shots to after the event? That's unusual, the photographer said, bride's request. She's feeling camera shy until the end. It was a simple shift, but it meant Margaret and Charles wouldn't have a single polished photo of their perfect arch or tablescape before the chaos began. Finally, Liam opened his email and sent one last message to the venue manager. Elise will be locking the gates to the beachfront ceremony area until exactly 6:05 p.m. to avoid early guest arrival. No exceptions. Liam Parker 6 minutes late wasn't much, unless you were starting a tightly timed sunset ceremony. The photographer would lose the best lighting, and the guests would be forced to watch the couple's vows in the creeping shadow of dusk. Liam sat back and watched the clock tick toward 4 p.m. He wasn't there physically, but he might as well have been tugging at the little threads that held the whole thing together. And soon, it would all start to fray. Showtime. Liam didn't go to the venue. He didn't need to. He had something better. The group text thread Vanessa had added him to weeks ago for family updates. At 5:55 p.m., the messages started rolling in. 5:56 p.m., Aunt Claire. We're locked out of the beach. Staff says we have to wait. 5:59 p.m., Uncle James. It's windy and cold out here. Why aren't they letting us in? 6:04 p.m., Vanessa. Doors finally opening. Mom is freaking out about the light. Liam pictured it perfectly. Margaret tugging at her gown, Charles pacing, the guests filing in just as the sun's gold began to slip into gray. The arch would still be bare. The florist wasn't scheduled until tomorrow morning. By 6:20 p.m. The first photos hit the thread. Liam zoomed in on one, a close-up of the stunning tablescape. Instead of vibrant lobsters and shellfish towers, rows of grilled chicken breasts sat limply beside lukewarm vegetables. The caption read, Vanessa, what happened to the seafood? Mom's losing it. The ceremony audio was the next blow. 6:34 p.m., Cousin Molly. Couldn't hear half the vows. Waves. Too loud. A few blurry cell phone videos followed, Margaret's voice straining against the crash of the tide. Charles leaning awkwardly toward a tinny microphone that kept cutting in and out. Liam sipped his beer, each new update tasting sweeter than the last. Then came the photographer complaint. 7:10 p.m. to Vanessa. Photographer says we missed golden hour. Mom's crying in the bridal suite. Liam leaned back on his couch, the warm glow of satisfaction settling in. He hadn't ruined the wedding outright. Oh no, that would have been too easy. Instead, he'd left them with something far worse. A perfect night that fell just short in every way, forever immortalized in mediocrity. And the best part? No one suspected him yet. The confrontation the morning after the vow renewal. Liam woke late to the smell of coffee and the sound of his phone. Buzzing relentlessly, he ignored the first few notifications, mostly the family group chat, still dissecting the unfortunate mishaps of the night, but then a new name appeared on the screen. Dad. He answered on the third ring. Morning. Charles's voice was taut, each word clipped. Funny thing, the venue manager said you were the only point of contact yesterday. Liam's heart rate didn't change. That's correct. I booked it. She also said you approved changes to the catering and locked the beach until after 6. That's what the contract allows me to do, Liam replied evenly. Did something go wrong? Silence. Then a low simmering. You think this is funny? Your mother was humiliated. Liam stood, pacing toward the window. Outside, the world looked calm, the sun glinting off wet pavement. I think, he said slowly, it's funny you called me a mooch. Banned me from the event I paid for, and then expected me to make sure it was flawless. Actions have consequences, Dad. Charles exhaled sharply through his nose, the way he always did when he was more furious than he wanted to admit. You crossed a line. No, Liam said. You crossed it first. I just read through it. The call ended without a goodbye. Liam knew that at some point the family narrative would twist. He'd be painted as vindictive, petty, ungrateful. That deep down, he suspected there was a part of his father, maybe a very small, stubborn part, that understood, and that was enough. The fallout by Monday morning, Liam didn't even need to check the group chat to know the storm had hit. The tone of the house was different, quieter, but tense, like everyone was holding their breath. He poured himself coffee, opened his laptop, and scrolled through the thread anyway. The overnight messages read like a slow-motion implosion. Vanessa, I told you we needed a day of coordinator. This wouldn't have happened if you listened to me. Margaret. The coordinator was supposed to be Liam, but he decided not to show up. Aunt Claire, wasn't he uninvited? Margaret, that's not the point. Uncle James. Then whose point is it? Because the chicken was awful and the speeches were drowned out by the ocean, Liam could almost hear the raised voices over breakfast somewhere across town. Every relative seemed to have a different theory about who was to blame, and the more they argued, the less united they were in blaming him. Vanessa had clearly switched sides. Her texts were cooler toward Margaret now, sharp with subtext. Charles barely posted at all, which Liam knew meant he was stuck in the middle of the crossfire. By noon, Liam got a private message from Vanessa. You didn't hear this from me, but Mom's saying she wishes she'd never done the renewal. Dad's been in the garage since last night. Whatever you did, it worked. Liam smiled faintly. He'd never expected to win in any loud, obvious way. This was better, a slow, quiet collapse from the inside, one argument at a time. Still, he knew there was one more move left to make. One final push that would ensure they never forgot exactly who had given them that night and exactly who had taken it away. The final play that evening. Liam sat at his desk, the contract folder open one last time. Buried at the back was the final invoice from the venue, the one marked payment due in 5 days. He'd paid the deposit, but the balance? Still entirely in his control, he dialed the venue's accounting office. This is Liam Parker, booking party for the Parker vow renewal. I won't be authorizing the final payment until I receive a written acknowledgement that the event did not meet expectations due to client interference. The woman on the other end hesitated. Client interference? Yes, guests locked out. Last-minute catering changes, photographer delays, all caused by the family's actions, not the venue's. It was a small twist of the truth, but enough to make the venue cover itself by putting blame on the Parkers. That record would follow. Them if they ever tried to book another high-profile event in town. Then came his second move, more personal. He uploaded a private online album, candid, unedited photos and shaky videos pulled straight from the group chat. The bare arch, the sad plates of chicken. Margaret's strained smile as she shouted her vows over the crashing waves. He shared it with every family member except his parents. The caption read simply, "For the memories." Liam, by midnight, the fallout had started. Vanessa messaged him again. Mom's furious. Dad's embarrassed. Aunt Claire is telling people they wasted everyone's time. They'll never live this down. Liam closed his laptop and leaned back. The quiet of his apartment settling around him. He hadn't screamed, he hadn't begged, and he hadn't made a scene. He'd just taken back the frame. The game was over. And Liam had won. The quiet victory 2 days later. Liam found himself walking along the same stretch of beach where the renewal had taken place. The tide was out, revealing dark rocks and streaks of wet sand. No flowers, no gold chairs, no arch, just the sound of waves, pure and unfiltered. It looked better this way. He sat on a driftwood log, letting the wind bite at his jacket. There was a deep, subtle satisfaction in knowing he pulled it off, without ever stepping into the spotlight. But the satisfaction wasn't clean. He'd burned a bridge, maybe several, and no part of him wanted to care. A larger part wondered why he'd ever been the one holding it up in the first place. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Vanessa again. You probably won't hear from Mom for a long time. Dad either. But I'm glad you stood up for yourself, he typed back. Standing up isn't always loud. And left it at that. Liam knew there would be stories told about that night for years, most of them unflattering toward him. He also knew that the people who mattered would understand the truth. He hadn't ruined their night. They had. He'd just stopped protecting them from the consequences. As the sun dipped low over the water, Liam stood, brushed the sand from his jeans, and walked away without looking back. Some endings didn't need applause. Epilogues 6 months later. Liam sat in a small coffee shop downtown, laptop open, a warm croissant cooling beside him. The air smelled of espresso and cinnamon, and for the first time in a long time, he felt untethered. Vanessa slid into the seat across from him. "You look good," she said, smiling in that knowing way. He shrugged. "Guess I've had less drama lately." She stirred her latte. "You know, Mom's still not talking to you, right? Not news. And Dad." "Well, he's civil, but he doesn't bring you up in front of anyone." Liam sipped his coffee. "Sounds peaceful." Vanessa smirked. "For what it's worth, people still bring up the chicken." "Not bad. Worse. It's become a running joke. Don't pull a Parker means don't try to throw a big show you can't deliver." Liam chuckled. "Guess I left a legacy." They talked about other things, work, friends, the new art gallery opening down the street, but under it all was an unspoken truth. Liam had stepped out of the role his family had written for him, and he wasn't going back. When Vanessa left, he lingered a little longer, watching people pass on the sidewalk, each carrying their own little stories. The croissant was cold now, but he didn't mind. Some things were better savored slowly. The end.